Hi ladies and gentlemen, my name is Manik Madaan, and in this video we'll be discussing about how USMLE Step 1 pass-fail will change everything. Since the start of 2022, everybody who's giving USMLE Step 1 will get not a numeric report anymore, but a pass-fail report, which is what's happening now with USMLE Step 1. The reason this is a concerning thing is because what used to happen is when they asked like program directors what were the top 10 factors you use to select applicants in interviewing, and this is the data from NRMP match, they asked program directors what is the most important factor you look at for screening applicants to interview them, and they said that it was the USMLE Step 1 score. But now we don't have a score anymore. And the reason this becomes an issue is because you need objective criteria to differentiate candidates, because if you look at a lot of the other criteria except the Step 2 CK score, let's say the LOR in the specialty, personal statement, MSP, Dean's letter, commitment to the specialty, grades, all of these things, if you look at them, most of them are extremely subjective data. How am I supposed to differentiate a Dean's letter that is positive for everyone from one person to another, other than the specific language that letter might have? Right? And who has the time for that? Because when, let's say for internal medicine, when somebody applies, right, there are about 7,000 candidates that apply for one program. And out of these people, only about 200 people are interviewed for 15 to 20 spots, right? Only these many people are selected. So we're going from 7,000 to just 200 and then 15 to 20, right? So during this process, the program has to have objective criteria to just select candidates, because if they don't, going through these 7,000 applications will drive people crazy. And if you look at program directors, these people are humans, right? They have this 6-month selection period, which is incredibly intense, provided that these people are not only managing the whole interview process, they're also managing the academics of the program, looking at the rotation schedule of all the 3 to 4 years to 5 years of the current residents, which is why USMLE Step 1 score was like just an objective criteria to select these candidates, 200 candidates, and then we used to interview them and rank them based on these skills, which is out of the scope of the video. Initially, USMLE Step 1 was scored, now it's not. So what will happen now is there will be a shift to Step 2 CK, because that is the only scored objective criteria we have to differentiate candidates, who's better, who's not. This is not to say that if somebody has a 270, they're better than another person who has a 250 or a 220. Absolutely not. But it's just in a real world scenario, in a practical based scenario, most of the times I can say that, you know, in a generalized manner, that somebody who's scoring like 260s or 270s or let's say 250s is a better candidate than somebody who has, say, a 200. Generally, program directors will actually select candidates, screen candidates based on Step 2 CK score. This change was basically implemented in 2022, right? And you might be thinking, okay, if it's going to be implemented by 2022 and people who have written their Step 1 before 2022, there'll be like so many of them, let's say, like, because people start writing it in the third years and fourth years. So after their preclinical years, it would take the effect of this at least 2 to 3 years for us to see the whole effect of it. But that's wrong. The reason is there are a lot of US medical schools in where medical students don't write Step 1 in their third year, right? Or after their second year, they write it in the fourth year along with Step 2 CK. A lot of US candidates in US med schools who write their Step 1 in fourth year, who are applying right now, have a pass-fail report, right? Versus, let's say, other candidates who have numerical scores. Plus, there are like IMGs and people from, let's say, other parts of the world who also have pass-fail score reports. So you will actually see this have an effect right now, because like pass-fail is already in place if you think it's not. So we will already be seeing these, like what will be happening with pass-fail. What should we take from this, and what are my thoughts about how this will change everything in USMLE? The first thing I really believe is this is a very sad thing, because Step 1, the preclinical subject testing with Step 1, which is preclinical subjects like pharmacology, physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, and pathology, all of these subjects, if you think about it, they make or contribute to clinical medicine. For example, let's say physiology plus biochemistry plus microbiology plus pharmacology is what is medicine. And I can even give you a true example of this in my own first year of my residency training when I was doing internal medicine training. So we had a patient who had sepsis, and this patient actually came with gram-positive bacteremia. And they asked people what organisms are causes of this gram-positive bacteremia. And what I mean is gram-positive rod. So gram-positive rods are basically Listeria monocytogenes, Corynebacterium diphtheriae, Actinomycetes, Bacillus anthracicus. These are gram-positive rods. And funnily enough, like I knew it and so many people did not know it. When you're thinking in medicine, knowing this is very important, because when we are going to target such gram-positive rods, we are going to be thinking about the antibiotics that go against those gram-positive rods. Whatever you learn in step 1 contributes to clinical medicine as well as step 2 CK. This will make step 2 CK harder for people because they just don't have that foundational knowledge and the preclinical knowledge that helps them ace their clinical medicine skills. The second thing is, as I mentioned before, this will shift it to a different objective criteria. And I mentioned that like the life of a PD is very hectic. So PD stands for program director, and these are the people responsible for screening candidates along with an interview committee. But the best way to do that, to just cut through the list, is a step 1 score, because these people don't have time. So the reason this was done is, so in America, most of medical students write their USMLE step 1 after second year. This exam used to be the most important thing, and they knew that, because it was all about getting into, like if you wanted to get into a competitive specialty, you needed to have a high step 1 score to differentiate you from other candidates. And if you scored low on it, you couldn't enter competitive specialties like dermatology, plastic surgery, or orthopedics, or good programs as well if you're not applying for as competitive specialties as this is. People used to be stressed. This led to a lot of mental fatigue, and there was like this common vote that let's make step 1 pass fail, which is why this was done, so that people in their first and second years take a chill pill, don't get mentally fatigued. But the issue that will happen because of this is it's all about gonna shift everything to step 2 CK. All the mental burden, all mental fatigue will be still there, but shifted to a later period, and it will actually increase because they don't have the skills to actually ace step 2 CK. And you have to build those skills from scratch when you don't know step 1 material that well. So this is just kicking the can down the road, according to me. I don't think this was a wise decision, because everybody has their thoughts. My thoughts is it was not a wise decision, because this is just solving a symptom, right? Not the root cause of burnout in med school. You can't just solve that by just making one exam pass fail and the other parts are numerical. What they expect is that this will cause the PDs, the application review committee, all of those people to have a holistic review of the candidate by looking at their LORs, ERA, CB, rotations. But the problem is these are highly subjective, because how am I supposed to differentiate or give a rating to an LOR? Because people are different who review these people. Let's say there's an attending who writes you an LOR and you misbehave, but this attending is really, really good by heart and they still write you a good LOR, versus another attending who just, has a very low threshold for tolerance to such ill behavior, and they give you a very, very bad LOR for even mildly bad behavior, right? So these things are extremely subjective. Language is extremely subjective for LORs, and things can be spinned in different ways in the ERA CV when you apply for the match. And rotations themselves are extremely subjective, because there are people, right, who say that it did this rotation, but they sometimes didn't even go, right, and got the LOR. There's so many variations, but step 1 was this one thing that you could not fake. Your score cannot be faked, which is why I don't think it will lead to a holistic review. What it will lead to is just kicking the can down to the road to step 2 CK, which will make it even terrible, because now you don't have the foundations of step 1. Next thing is harder to distinguish accomplished candidates. Think of a world where you are looking at a person's step 1 and a step 2 score combined versus just a step 2 CK score with a pass-fail step 1. The problem in this world is when you look at their step 1 and step 2 score combined, if there is a high score in both, like step 1 and step 2, that means there is a level of precision in this person, right? He repeats himself and there's consistency in this person, and he did not just perform well in one exam, had weak clinical medicine, or they just did not have weak basics and have strong clinical medicine, it was a combination of both. Versus when you just have a step 2 CK score, and in a world where it's marked by percentile, like based on other people's performance, you don't really have like a good gauge of that person's accomplishments. But now that cannot be changed, and it is what, according to me, is not the best way to screen candidates. Solving a symptom versus the root cause of anxiety, and people are just going to worry about step 2. Next thing is med school status will matter more. And why would that happen? When you have just one score, you need other ways to think about the candidate. And there are like places where, let's say in 4th year, a lot of places, medical students do not even write their step 2 until the very end. So the match has begun and they don't have their step 2 score yet. So what are you going to do in that world where step 1 is pass fail, and all you have is that student's step 1 pass fail report, and that's all you have? In that scenario, the med school status will matter more. If you're from Harvard, Columbia, or like all those big Ivy schools, status will matter. For IMGs, International Medical Graduates, say I'm from India, your medical school status, let's say All India Institute of Medical Sciences, if you're from like really great places like MAMC, AIMS, right? What happens is a lot of program directors, especially not talking about Ivy League programs, but really talking about programs that take IMGs, they have Indian program directors, Pakistani program directors. All of these people know about AIMS, MAMC, how great these people are, which leads to biasing towards these institutions. And I've already seen like that plague by like talking to a few program directors who actually prefer students coming from here. And if step 1 is pass fail, and let's say you just have a step 2 CK score, being from better colleges will matter more. Last but not the least is no second chances if you score low in step 2 CK. So think about a scenario where you have a step 1 pass fail report. This is the like current scenario, and a step 2 CK score of 230, which is below average, versus step 1 score of 245 and step 2 CK score of 230, where step 1 saves you in a way because step 1 is at least average here, and step 1 of 230 and step 2 of 245. So these two scenarios far trump the scenario that you see in the first case. So the scenario 2 and 3 trump scenario 1, where you won't get second chances if you score low, because that's just the only objective screening criteria. Last part, the exam also got a bit tougher. They increased the passing score from 194 to 196. You will see that people are actually failing step 1 way more, because I get emails all the time that like people have failed step 1 and how, like what should they do? Not even once, but twice. I think that could also be because people are not taking this exam seriously at all, because it's just pass fail. There are people who just go write this exam without even doing UWorld, thinking it's pass fail, and like they'll just make it through. Step 1 is not an easy exam, right? Do not do or get into the foolishness of giving it thinking you're gonna pass it just by chilling throughout your study period. That is not the case. It is become a bit harder. Let's talk about step 2 CK. So step 2 CK is going to become the new screening criteria, and I can bet you this is going to be the case because PDs don't have time. One objective screening criteria, like I told you, but it will still be a weaker criteria. It has to be supplemented by something more which is easier to screen with. It might be med school status. It might also be step 3, which I will go into later. It will be harder to prepare and score high for people motivated by scores. Note the thing that I just said, motivated by scores. The reason is because if step 1 was scored, you would prepare really like well for it. Now that it is pass fail, all you need to do is just pass it, right? And there are videos on YouTube which will teach you how to pass step 1 easily, right? And I think I saw this video of a guy who made a video on how to pass step 1 easily, and that guy ended up failing step 2. I'm not like making fun of anyone. I'm just saying, don't think about passing step 1 easily. That is a foolish mindset to have. It will be harder to prepare and score high here for people who are motivated by scores, especially for step 2 CK, because they won't focus on step 1. Remember, step 2 is step 1 plus clinical knowledge. Highly important, because 60% of the whole step 2 is actually step 1, and the clinical knowledge is just built upon, it's just another layer of complexity upon those fundamentals, and step 3 also builds upon that. It's like a ladder model. It's easier to jump from one step to the other, like if you are on that steps level. But let's say you are not on step 1's level and you have to jump to step 2's level, let's say score high on it, it's harder to make that 2-step jump rather than if you had that step one, like you were on this step one, you were on this threshold, and you could make that jump way easily because it's just one step, right? And step 3 also comes in the line here, because step 3 also in a way requires a strong foundation in step 1 and step 2 to easily pass it. Understand that step 2 CK requires an intensive knowledge of step 1 material, and it is correlated with success in residency as well. So that's the only positive thing I see out of it. However, again, clinical knowledge is built upon fundamental knowledge. I don't know how many times I'll repeat it for people to hear it, but just understand that is the truth. So next thing, USMLE step 3. Basically, step 3 will become a leverage for people who have given it. And this is especially true for international medical graduates. The reason is because when you are, let's say, in a US med school, you cannot write step 3 until you have joined residency. And this is true for most US medical schools. There are some who allow them to write it in 4th year. I've heard about it, but most tell me that most of them write it in residency. However, if you're an international medical graduate who has graduated, you can write USMLE step 3, provided that you are ECFMG certified. Only you need ECFMG certification to write step 3. Without that, you cannot write step 3. And this requires you to be in the US as well, which is unlike step 1 and step 2. If you have step 3 for programs, it will act as a soft filter plus rank order list accelerator. What does that mean? So a lot of programs that take international medical graduates also look if the person has given step 3. If you have given step 3, right, that is a great thing for a program, because number one, intern year is busy. So intern year is PGY-1, your first year of residency. And remember, this is when you learn the whole system of EMRs, you learn the whole insurance system, the whole medical system, how it works. And it is intensive. You have to take time out of intern year to write step 3. And programs don't like that, because then you're not focusing on the residency, and what you are focusing on is preparing for this exam, which is what programs don't like. So you act as an unfocused PGY-1 who can compromise their clinical training. You can get burned out and drop out of residency. The program doesn't want that. And what if you fail? Right? There is always that possibility that if you fail step 3, that is another liability for a program. So an IMG who hasn't written step 3 is more of a liability than an IMG who's written it, who's more of an asset. And this is not true for everyone. If you have a high step 2 CK score, the program might not even care about it. But more often than not, having step 3 will act as a soft filter, get you the interview. What I mean by that, this is get you the interview, plus it will act as a rank order list accelerator. So when they make the rank order list, if you have step 3, they'll move you up because you are just a better candidate for their residency. By the way, this is the screening criteria. It's already in place for majorly psychiatry, especially like programs that take international medical graduates, and some medicine programs as to what I know of. But you will see this become even more important and a leverage criteria for a lot of programs. Holistic review. Some programs, I think, will adapt to it, but about 90 to 95% will not, because life of a PD is incredibly hectic. These people have clinical medicine duties, so many academic duties. They have to interview people at the same time, and they don't have time, right, in the end. So they need objective criteria, a fast way to cut through the list, right? But there are a few programs which I think 5 to 10% which might take it into account. And the reason I say this is because I actually interviewed in one of the programs where I think it was University of Alabama. And what happened in University of Alabama was these people were actually blinded to my scores. And I have a score of 260 and 271. And I was surprised, these people were completely blinded to the scores, the interviewers, and they did not know that I scored so high. And I still got the interview, and they ranked me based upon not knowing my scores. But this is a case for, let's say, a psychiatry residency where only 1,000 people apply, 1,000 to 1,500 people, and they only interview out of these, let's say, 100 people. So I could see that being the case for a specialty that's smaller than a specialty like internal medicine. However, for bigger specialties, I don't see holistic review as making the case in step 2 and step 3. These two scoring criteria and your med school status, visa status will be more important than that. Being said, these are not to be ignored. Having 4 US based LORs is again a numbers game. and it's a good thing. Having specific LORs at the end, rotations in American institutions are also a positive aspect. Like when they like actually rank you, they actually have like these lists where if you have done rotations, you get extra points. The better LORs you have, you get extra points, and that accelerates your rank order list as well. Your personal statement might also make an impact, but I think this makes an impact only after you get the interview, and a lot of programs only review these things after they select you for the interview and not before that, which I know can blow your mind. Possibly, but not entirely. How to approach the changes. Realize that you don't need to be scared, right? When let's say you're an international medical graduate or a US graduate and you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Understand, change is the only constant. We are in a world of dynamism, right? Everything changes at exponential rates. Like you can see the internet evolving, we have nuclear fusion, and systems are only gonna evolve, and we need to evolve with them. That's the only choice we have, because if we don't, we will get left behind. And how do we deal with this change? Number one, please, I'm saying this, approach step one as if it were numerical. Do not make the mistake of watching videos on YouTube who say how to pass step one easily. That is most misleading statement you will ever see, because you will compromise on your like foundational knowledge, clinical knowledge, and this will compromise your whole application. Please approach it with the most attention and detail. I would recommend at least a period of 7 months prep. If you can't do 7 months, I think even 5 months work. And I've made videos on this. You can go to the description and you can watch them and just make your own plan. Everyone's different, but please at least do 2 different question banks for step one and do the basic resources for step one, which is BNB, which is the video series for step one. So BNB videos are amazing, right? And for so it's called Boof apps. So BNB videos, UWorld is great. First aid. So first aid is great, along with USMLE RX. So USMLE RX is a question bank developed by the first aid team, and it will help you understand the Bible of step one in a question-based manner, after which you can easily solve UWorld questions and score really high on this. And you will develop test taking skills with UWorld as well, because you learned the question solving beforehand. So you're like kind of preheating the oven and then making the dish with UWorld once you're done with one question bank. So 2 question banks. So Boof apps, right? And Pathoma and Sketchy. So Pathoma is the pathology book and Sketchy is mnemonic books, mnemonic videos that you can watch. And understand that you need to plan step 3 in advance. So step 1, if you approach that well, step 2 CK will go well. Give it time. Make sure you focus really a lot your most energy on step 2 after you're done with step 1. Score high on that and make sure you do step 3 in advance if you're an IMG at least, because if you can do this, it will help you accelerate yourself in the rank order list, which is prepared in the end, where it will put you in the top preferences of the program. Secondly, this will also get you more interviews, since you have step 3 and you won't that's an asset for a program rather than being a liability. So how do you plan step 3 in advance? Okay, so the first thing you need to know about step 3 is give it within at least 3 to 4 months of step 2 CK. The reason I say so is a lot of step 3, what you will see is it's very similar to step 2, and the fresher you are on step 2 CK, the better you will perform on step 3 as well. The UWorld for step 3 isn't as beneficial. I just did 40% of it and I had step 2 CK knowledge and I scored just fine. I passed with easily, right? Let's just say I passed by a good margin. It wasn't an issue for me. So please, after 3 to 4 months of step 2 CK, try to write it within 3 to 4 months. Second thing to consider about step 3. The second thing is, make sure you write, if possible, write step 3 before the match season starts, before your ERA CB gets logged and the programs can see it. And this usually is September 29th of the match season you're applying. For example, if you're applying for match season 2023, if you're applying for that season, so right now that's going on in 2022. When we say match 2023, that's basically September 29, 2022 is when ERA CV locks and the result gets announced in, I believe, 14th of March of 2023. So if you can do it before this timeline, that's great, right? Because once you have step 3 before it, the programs can see it in your application and you will receive more interviews. So if you can do before September 29th or 2022 for let's say match season 2023, and you can apply it similar to other match seasons as well. If that doesn't happen for some reason, and this was my case, make sure you write step 3 as soon as possible before the math season ends, and keep updating the programs if about your step 3 starters. If you receive the score report, send it to all the programs you apply to, because that will push you up on the rank order list, if it won't get you more interviews at least, right? And lastly, if there is holistic review, let's say 10 to 15% of programs, right, they're going to look at the whole CV, and anyways programs do value your subjective criteria at least once they've interviewed you. I would focus more on qualitative aspect as well, and that means your LORs, 4, at least 3 US based LORs, 4 if possible. That's best. It will, like, it's amazing. PS, rotations, and research. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please press the like button and subscribe. Thank you.